Welcome to another episode of Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them. I'm your host, John Braddock. I'm the author of the Amazon bestseller, Click Here When I Die, and founder of My Life and Wishes, which is an online planning and document storage solution created to make things easier for those you love. Today, I'm going to take a little bit of a different turn. We're not going to talk about estate planning nightmares because, hey, I'm the host of the show and I reserve the right to talk about what I want, right? So today I want to talk about something different because I've recently met a person and learned a lot about a particular topic. So I ask you, our listeners, have you ever heard of a death doula? Or perhaps you've heard the term, but not quite sure what that is. Well, friends, today's the day. We will answer those questions and so much more. I'm thrilled to have as my guest Marni Blank. Marni is the founder of Begin with the End. She's a trained death doula, mediator, lawyer, or at least she tells me a recovering lawyer, and family-funded small business owner. She completed her death doula training through Going with Grace, mediation training through New York Peace Institute and Elder Decisions, grief training through Living Through Loss Counselling Society, and she is NEDA proficient. Marni's goal is to create a safe space to learn and talk about death, dying, and grief. This includes accountability in completing advanced directives, end-of-life planning, creating legacy projects, and facilitating conversations within families. She brings deep compassion, active listening, practical resources, and a healthy dose of humor to her work. Death and grief affects us all. The more we connect with our families, communities, and ourselves, the less fear plays into these important discussions and decisions. She's written articles for Trust and Wills and Lantern. Please help me welcome Marni. Marni, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so glad to be here, John.
Terrific. Now, you are in New York City, if I'm correct.
I am. I'm based in Brooklyn.
Wonderful, wonderful. And before we jump into death doula, you told me when we first met a while back that you were a recovering attorney. What does that mean?
It means that I was practicing. I went to Brooklyn Law School and I practiced for about 5 years, both for state and federal government in New York. And then I decided that it wasn't my passion. And so I have gone into entrepreneurship since, but I use my law degree all the time in basically everything I do. But I am in recovery mode in that I'm not currently practicing.
I understand. And it's so true. You know, I ask people all the time, what is your why? Because I'm curious. I want to know why people do what it is they do. And it all boils down to what you're passionate about, right? And if we work in an area that we're passionate about, it's really not so much like working at all. But again, it's helping others, helping to solve problems, which is truly wonderful. So
I completely agree. I mean, we're here for a limited amount of time, as we both know. We should be doing things that bring us joy. And we can always change direction, which is a beautiful thing.
absolutely. So well said. So for the listener, because I had heard the term death doula for the last couple of years, but really wasn't 100% sure what that was until I met you. And it's really intriguing. So can you start by sharing with our listeners what is a death doula, and then your passion behind it? What inspired you to become one?
Sure. So a death doula is a non-medical professional who helps navigate the emotional, the practical, and the logistical components of death, dying, and grief. So as you sort of touched on, the practical could be helping with advanced directives and end-of-life planning and pre- and post-death logistics. There's the spiritual and the emotional. It can be creating rituals or incorporating traditions into someone's last days, or helping someone think about, where they stand with death. Is it something that scares them? Is it something that that there are blocks around thinking about the end? And it's offering grief support and respite for families at the very end, and for the person who is actively dying. And then there's educational. I work with people of all ages. It can be, my current clients range from 29 to 55 right now. So it's people who are starting to think about planning at different life stages. People who have just had children, who have gotten married or divorced, who are starting to accumulate wealth and are thinking about these things. And it's educating people around their options, around what's needed. It's a very large topic, and a lot of people need help navigating it. And so that's sort of where death doulas fit in. And then for me personally, I got in sort of from my estate planning nightmare, which is that I was at work one night and I got a phone call out of the blue from a hospital saying that my mother had been in a freak car accident. And I will skip to the end that she is okay. But in that moment, I was not only thinking about, is she okay? It was, oh my gosh, I have all of her paperwork. She had gone as far as to get the will in order and the power of attorney, but I hadn't signed off on them. I hadn't gotten the things that I needed signed or witnessed or notarized in some cases. And in order to be with my mom at the hospital, I had to scramble and do all those things first. And when you're dealing with logistics, you cannot be in grief. And when you're in grief, it's really hard to deal with logistics. And in the ensuing months of dealing with all the things that I had to deal with, it was very overwhelming. And I thought, if I had this emotional block around dealing with paperwork that had to do with my mother's death, other people would. And I felt very lonely in the process and didn't want other people to struggle the way that I did. And so I ended up taking death doula training because I wanted to understand all the aspects that I didn't know at the time, so that I could support people in a more holistic manner.
Wow, that's amazing. And thank you for sharing a personal story. I'm very happy that your mother was came out of that
Yes.
scenario. So being a death doula, I understand, and we'll touch on some different aspects. So yeah, in short, how does a death doula differ from like other roles in end of life care, such as, hospice or things of that nature?
Yeah. Death doulas work in tandem with so many other aspects of the death industry. So we work with hospice. Hospice typically offers respite support at the end through volunteers, and volunteers typically volunteer about 3 to 4 hours a week. They offer social work services and usually a nurse. And death doulas don't have that time constraint. They can be hired by the families individually to sort of fill in the gaps, so that someone has more support, and that the families have support in between when hospice is available to be there for them. They also work in tandem with estate planners, financial planners. It's really about creating a holistic experience for a client. Every aspect is needed. And so we're just a great add-on to other people who are helping those get their planning in order.
Got it. It's interesting, and we talk about planning and and in ages. So your particular clients, as you indicated, presently are between 29 and I think 54. So when we talk to people, we know that people that have actually made an end of life plan or estate planning under that age is only about half. It's actually less than half who have done it. And people are always like, oh, well, I have time. Well, do we? Because I don't have that crystal ball, right? Or it's bad luck, or whatever their excuses are. But as based on the clients that you're working with, they fall into age groups where so many people haven't even had a conversation with family or have an estate plan in place. And, the potential nightmare for not being prepared, as we all know too well who work in this world, can be devastating for family.
It's so true. A lot of people that I work with come to me because they've had a parent who passed away and it was a nightmare, and that they don't want it to happen again with the other parent, that they saw what happens when things don't go right, and that they want to feel more in control, more empowered, and to be able to start having those important conversations when they didn't get to have that the first time. And that is when, the light bulb goes off for a lot of people. It's when that thing doesn't go right, because to your point, so many people are worried about having the conversation with the parent, not wanting to make them upset, or thinking, well, I have plenty of time, or I don't have that many resources, I don't need anything yet. That's something that's definitely important down the line, but not for me. And in reality, we are not guaranteed a long life, um, and we know what happens to the people left behind when we don't have our ducks in a row. It's not pretty.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's interesting because it always seems like, talking about, your own mortality is this taboo topic, right? That shouldn't be talked about. And one of the biggest aha moments I had when we started creating My Life and Wishes in our company is some of our key advisors said, one of the biggest uphill battles that you will experience is that people don't know they have this problem until they have the problem
Right.
or experience it with someone else. So, one of the reasons, I've started this podcast and have invited wonderful guests like yourself is to get the word out there. It's okay to talk about death. I mean, come on, folks. I'm going to die, right? I'm not going to be the first, and I'm not going to be the last, and it's going to happen.
It's
And
the one thing we all have in common, quite honestly.
exactly, exactly. It's death and taxes, right? But a lot of people don't pay their taxes, but death is still certain, right?
It's true. And
So
it's funny that when you start talking about it, it becomes so much easier to have these conversations. It's that breaking of the seal. When, now everyone that I know knows that I do this. And so whenever there's an article they see about death or dying or grief, they'll send it my way. My Instagram is full of people just sending me articles they think I'm interested in. But that's great because they are aware. They're now more aware of it because we're talking about it. And that's really how we change how people think about death or planning.
oh, exactly. It's funny because I have friends who say to me, like, John, dude, you spend your life, all you do is talk all day long about death. I mean, isn't that like, just horrible? And, my answer is, well, no, for number one, because my mission is to educate people. Number two, I don't have that fear because I have an estate plan. I have everything laid out. And so if I don't make it home tonight, I know that it's going to be far easier for my family than if I hadn't done any of this plan or got things, put together. So no, it's not horrible to talk about. It's part of life. It's a reality.
Yeah,
I was born, I'm gonna live, I'm gonna die, you know.
well
So let me
said.
ask you this question. If you can, and I respect confidentiality and those kind of things, but can you share a story of a particularly impactful experience that you had working with a family?
Well, I've had a couple. Yes, I can, but there's one that didn't happen to me personally that I thought was a very telling thing, that was relayed to me recently. I was having a conversation with a funeral home in Brooklyn, that I very much respect, and they're really changing the game in the in the death space. I would honestly have my birthday party there. It's so beautiful. But we were having a conversation and we were talking about planning. And they said that they were currently dealing with a family where the mother hadn't had any planning in order, and there was a large group of children. I think it was 4 children, and they were split on whether to cremate or to bury the mother. And it's in court. The mother is sitting waiting, at the funeral home for months because the children are fighting. And so not only is, this woman not interred, not in the ground, but also it's causing a huge rift between family. And that's not something that one just heals from when it gets to court. And so that to me was just, this in a nutshell. How can we have these conversations in advance? How can the children get on the same page, because they know their mother's wishes? When you don't, there's all of this pressure put on the family to make choices that, if they just had a clear directive of what to do, this wouldn't have gotten there. And so that was something that really stood out to me. And in terms of other planning, I have another client whose mother, doesn't really want to talk about it, hasn't fully flushed out her wishes, but she has said that she's hidden money around her apartment, that when she dies, basically her children are going to have to go on a treasure hunt. And that again puts a lot of stress on the children, who might be clearing out a closet and not sure if, there's a coat pocket full of $50 bills or not. And this is an extreme example, but it happens. It happens all the time. And so again, when things are figured out in advance, you aren't putting the pressure on the ones left behind.
Oh, yeah, you are so right. And as I always say, some people say, well, hey, death is a time that brings family closer together. And I would contest that statement and say that death in the family can become one of the most divisive times in a family, much like your situation that you just mentioned with what do we do with mom? And some of the kids say, well, no, we should bury her and have a plot, and where we can go visit and those kind of things. And we have others who are saying, nah, cremation. And if we don't clearly express our wishes, family is going to fight about it. I mean, Michelle and I have 6 children. And I mean, we couldn't agree on what movie to see, what to eat for dinner, and those kinds of things, much less leaving them to make these real heavy decisions. In that same vein, regarding cremation, as an example, in a podcast I released yesterday with Laura Cowan, who's an estate planning attorney, also in New York City, by the way. She told a story about a woman who had planned and had done her will and put all of her directives and final wishes together. And when she met with the family after, they knew she wanted to be cremated, but weren't sure what to do with the ashes. And when they went through everything with the attorney, with Laura, she showed them clearly spelled out that because mom was a traveler, she loved to travel and do things, that her wish was that they take her ashes up in a hot air balloon and scatter the ashes, which they ended up doing, and provided them with this, great peace of mind that we're honoring mom's wishes and doing what should have been done.
That's so beautiful and so personal, and that's how it can be. The silver lining of what happened in my family is that we've become much more open about talking about these things. And I know exactly now where my mother wants her ashes scattered, in a very specific area. And both my sister and I are on the same page about it. There is no question. I know exactly what to do. And that takes a huge relief off of me. It's hard enough to grieve someone without the added question marks. And so I think it is really starting to have the conversations early so that it can be personal, it can be beautiful, and it can be a celebration, and not just, a stressful situation.
Oh, exactly. And to the other point you brought up about hidden money and saying, "Oh, my kids are going to have this treasure hunt to go on." I encourage all my listeners, if you're hiding money, make sure someone knows where it is, or at least leave a good treasure map so they can find it. Because on some of my previous podcasts, you've heard the story about the gentleman whose father had actually buried gold in the basement, and so, so, so I won't go into that story, but you know, maybe dad was a pirate. I don't know, but he hid gold in the basement. We had another gentleman who hid all his poker winnings in a jacket pocket in the bedroom closet.
Oof.
You know what happens to the clothes, right? The survivors gather the
Yep.
clothes up and off to Goodwill they go, and off goes $15,000 with it, right? So if you're hiding money in the Campbell soup can, steak in the pantry, or other places, be sure someone can find it.
That was
Oh
just
wow.
in The Bear. I don't know if you've seen that show yet, The Bear, but season one there was some hidden money, and I guess I shouldn't spoil it, but yes, there's a whole plot around it. So
The Bear. Wow,
The
I'm gonna
Bear
check that out.
on Hulu.
Wow. I'm gonna have to get into that. So let me ask this. Thank you for sharing some of that. So obviously you can be involved at the very end of life if someone brings you in, but also on the front end, when they know the time is coming, or even work with someone like myself, right? Who I don't know when my last day is gonna be. I've got an estate plan and things, but there's things that I think you can share uh, with our audience that might be helpful to when the day comes, that just make things easier. I know you do like legacy projects and those kind of things. Can you kind of give us some ideas about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I get into that, to your point of people coming to me before the time, I recently worked with someone who came to me because she worried her grandfather. Her grandfather had mentioned to her that he had regrets and he was in his 90s, and that she really wanted someone to talk to him because he hadn't opened up to the family about these, but she was so sad at the thought of him passing while having regrets that she wanted me to talk to him. And sadly, before we had that conversation, he did pass away. And this is the thing. It's, for me, it's how can I live my life without those regrets? Never gonna not have some, but the big things. How can I get to the end and feel that my life is complete, that I have said what I want to say to people, shared that I love to who wants that, given forgiveness or sought forgiveness. And that's a huge thing that people can do before the very end. Um,
That,
and
that's impactful, because some of our listeners are religious and some are not, and there's always the deathbed confessions and those kind of things, and I want to see my priest and get some things off of my chest, but for those who are, it's such a good point. Beyond the some secrets shouldn't be taken to the grave, there might just be some things that I regret in my life, things that I've done, people I've hurt, people I've harmed, that maybe they're not still here. Maybe I just can't bring myself to have that conversation with them. But if I can
right,
share that and lighten the burden.
absolutely, it doesn't have to involve anyone else but oneself. It can be writing letters to people, whether you send them or not. There are ways in which to get things out, and not take it with you, and letting go in a certain way. And legacy projects are something that can help with that. It is a way of releasing information, giving knowledge. For me, legacy projects are about how do you want to be remembered? And it can be passing on generational knowledge through audio recordings of your life history or stories or words of wisdom. It can be creating an heirloom quilt of important textiles that are within the family, like a tablecloth or, shirts or ties. It can be recipe books of family recipes and the stories behind them that you create for the rest of the family. There's so many beautiful ways in which to capture someone's essence and pass it along. And that's really all we can do at the end is we live on through those who we love. And how can we share more of a piece of ourselves with them?
It's interesting, you talk about things and you reflect back on, I remember, my grandparents and, grandparents always love to tell stories, right? But, when I'm a teenager, I don't want to hear those stories, right?
Yeah.
I got to go play ball in the backyard or I got somewhere else to go. It's like, thanks, Nana, but, we'll talk later. But the one thing my grandmother, Nana, taught me, because we grew up across the street from her, was how to cook. And so I am one of those men that love to cook and do the majority of the cooking in our household. And it's all because my grandmother taught me. And she was an amazing cook. And if I had all of her recipes, and I have no idea whatever happened to all those because she died in the early 90s. Boy, I mean, that would be amazing. So, think about the things that you all have, people, and what might be sentimental or meaningful to someone in your family, and set it aside or make something for it. We just
Yeah.
recently added, as Marni, into the My Life and Wishes into our vault, a section called the Video Vault, which is a place where I've always wanted to, and I'm glad we've added it now. It's a place I can upload short video messages to my family, to each one of my children, to my spouse, and a full, kind of a legacy, will, if you want, life's values and those things.
I love that. And you can even use that to capture certain, sentimental objects that they might not have, monetary value. You might not be putting them in your will because they're worth thousands of dollars, but they have very important significance to you as a human. And why do you have that? Or where did you get that? And creating a video to be like, please don't throw this out. This is, this came from my grandmother and, traveled from X, Y, and Z. And so there are ways in which to capture even the little things, so that people know, and don't just throw them out as, what is this, but, understand the meaning behind those things.
Exactly. So as we're winding up on our time, um, let me ask this question. Is there something I didn't ask you that maybe I should have, or might be good information for our listeners?
I think what you do is so important in the work that I try to help people with is organizing in advance, making sure that you have all of your documents in the right place and are, someone knows where they are, that they're easily accessible, whether they're online and in a physical location, and that people know the little things. How do you get into your apartment? Who has keys to your apartment? um, you know, the dog, what are their favorite toys? Are they scared of certain things? What's their vet? I have a full page on I have a dog, and I have a full page in my end of life documents about taking care of her and what that involves, so that someone can just come into my life and know exactly what to do. And then the other thing is we just don't know what we don't know, and ask questions. It's an overwhelming topic. And what we've talked about is people are very uncomfortable with it. But there are so many resources out there for how to start these conversations with with your elders, how to start having the conversation with your spouse, or anyone. And there are ways in which to have support in a topic that you may not feel comfortable with and therefore shy away from.
Yeah. So, my big takeaway is, look, if you're in a situation where you or a loved one is near the end of life and you're not sure all the things to do, would be to contact Marni. And if she's in your area, she could assist, or she could certainly refer you to others in other parts of the country to help. If you're not sure where you're not on your deathbed, but you're not sure where to get started with planning. You haven't done an estate plan or something, or maybe you've done a DIY will and things, but you don't know all the other things to include. Marni's the kind of person that can help you through that process. Step by step, the simple things like, what happens to the dog? Who takes care of the dog? Where do we, how do we access your smartphone, your laptops, and all the other things? So, that's amazing. So if our listeners want to reach out to you, if they just have general questions about, again, what is a death doula, or if they want some ideas, or want to contact perhaps a doula in their own area, how can they reach you?
Yeah, you can find me on my website, which is beginwiththeend.co. Or you can email me at marniblank.com. And those will also take you to my Instagram page, where I post a lot of content and information. And honestly, anyone who just has questions, I'm happy to answer anything that people have questions about. I offer a 20-minute free consultation for anyone who's interested. And if I'm not the person, I have so many resources for people who can assist. And that's really what it's all about, is getting people the resources that they need.
That's awesome. And thank you so much, Marni, for joining us. I know our listeners have learned a lot today. I certainly have, more so since the last time that we spoke. Very insightful. Um, I appreciate you. I appreciate the work that you do in helping families.
And
And
same to you. My Life and Wishes is a great resource. Anything that helps people organize at the end is amazing.
well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And to our listeners, again, thank you so much for your time in joining us. And as always, plan ahead and make it a great day. Thank you for listening. You can subscribe, listen, and download all the Estate Planning Nightmares episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. We'd be grateful if you would save our show to your favorites and share them with others. Remember, life is messy, but death is messier. You can learn more about My Life and Wishes Legacy Vault at www.mylifeandwishes.com. Plan ahead and make it a great day.